Welcome, everyone, to the DEAP podcast. Today we have a very important and very controversial topic that I think everyone will be able to relate very closely to, and that is pizza. What should or shouldn't you put on a pizza? I think that there are definitely things you should not put on pizza.
Unfortunately, I think everything belongs on pizza, so we're going to have an interesting discussion here today.
You could not be more wrong in this. I'll start from the extreme. Is it okay to put plutonium on pizza?
Well, I certainly wouldn't eat a pizza with plutonium on it, but if you really wanted to, I'm not going to stop you.
Okay, so what are the qualifications that we need for what can go on a pizza? Should it be something that will not kill you? Is that a reasonable axiom to start with, that things put on a pizza for the purpose of eating should not kill you or anyone eating it?
I think that's pretty reasonable for most of the population.
For most of the population, but not all. So are we saying that it's okay to put poison on a pizza if we're trying to kill someone?
Well, you probably shouldn't do that, especially if you're serving that pizza to company.
But what if you're an assassin trying to kill someone with a pizza?
I really hope you're not an assassin trying to kill someone with pizza.
It's okay. We already had the pizza. You're already digesting it. You don't worry. The damage has already been done. Okay, so excluding circumstances where you were intentionally trying to kill someone, which I think we would agree in terms of eating pizza, that is usually not in the scope. You should use non-lethal toppings.
I think that's fair.
So things like plutonium, various types of poison, polonium, whatever, anything that could poison you, let's stay away from. And needles, probably not a good idea. Any blades, let's keep them off of pizza.
I think that's fair.
Okay. We agree on something. That's good. In terms of things that are edible, things that can be eaten without causing damage to you, is there any limitation on what should go on a pizza?
No.
No limitations whatsoever.
Yeah.
Let's find the gray area. There is cyanide in apple cores.
Yes.
Is it okay to put an apple core on a pizza? Now, it's a very small amount of cyanide, but it's a poison.
But I don't think anybody's really going to notice unless you covered your pizza in apple cores.
Which is a very odd thing to have on your pizza.
Exactly. Nobody's going to eat a pizza like that.
But putting the rest of the apples on is fine.
Yes.
Even if it tastes bad.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to make you eat this very bad tasting pizza.
Sure. And so there's a social aspect to pizza, which I think we can come back to. But in terms of what should go on a pizza, does the topping on a pizza need to taste good?
I think that's probably a good idea for most company.
For most. So what company would it not be good for?
I mean, if I was serving pizza to somebody I didn't like, I probably would make sure that pizza is not the best thing in the world.
Interesting. Okay, so it's okay to use pizza to spite people.
Yes.
Are there certain toppings that should only be used to spite and not for the purpose of enjoyment?
Well, for me personally, I'm not a fan of anchovies.
Is anyone a fan of anchovies? I know it's a thing that you can get anchovies on pizza, but are there people that actually enjoy anchovies on pizza?
Somebody has to.
It had to have been a thing at some point, unless it was just some running joke and a gag that people just assume is real.
That is true.
You can get canned anchovies.
I wouldn't put it past people to still be putting them on pizza, although I have never seen one in real life.
I think we were probably in agreement that if you put anchovies on a pizza, it's because you don't like the person that you're giving it to.
Yes.
Okay. So we've got some qualifications. You can put you can put anything on a pizza you want. However, some of that is, I want to kill the person. If you don't want to kill the person, you can go to less drastic measures, not plutonium. You can just put anchovies on it for people you dislike. So we're getting closer. What about pineapple?
I can live with pineapple on pizza.
You can live with it, but do you enjoy it?
Not particularly.
Do you think that other people should enjoy it?
Yes.
And people can enjoy whatever they want. That's right. You can enjoy whatever your heart desires. I think that stereotypically sweet, like the flavor of sweet is separated from the flavor of savory and salty. I know that sweet and salty is a thing. It's something that I'm not a particular fan of, but mixing it with savory is usually an unusual. It's usually an unusual. It's frequently in a strange mix. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah, you don't typically see that mixed together.
So then why is it okay with the savory cheese and sweet pineapple?
I mean, it obviously works because it's a pretty common topping.
Should it be common? What percent of people do you think actually like pineapple on pizza?
It's probably a lot smaller than the amount of people that like pepperoni or vegetables.
Right. And I think that of the vegetables that you can put on a pizza, pineapple is one that's really far down the list and is just for some reason included, like on normal pizza. And it seems like a very major outlier that it should definitely go on a dessert pizza.
Okay. That's what I was thinking of.
To me, the problem with pineapple on pizza is when you mix the pineapple with the cheese and tomato sauce, and it's perfectly fine with the form factor of a pizza. It's just the particular ingredients in an average pizza don't mesh well with pineapple.
I can definitely understand where you're coming from with that.
So convince me that pineapple should, under normal circumstances and under a normal list of ingredients, why pineapple should be included in pizza.
Well, we've already got a large number of people who like it. Potentially, depending on what is in your pizza, it might go better than others. So if you're looking at a pizza with maybe lighter cheese or a sweeter sauce, then it's more likely to match. Although typically people are not looking for pizza to be sweet, but you never know. And
pizza, well, tomato sauce specifically does have a little bit of sweetness to it. I think there is some sugar included in it.
Yes, typically there's a lot more sugar in tomato sauce than you'd expect.
Right, and I think that's something that most people don't acknowledge. It's not the type of thing that you would want to put in a smoothie.
Oh, for sure not.
You know, I love the saying of intelligence is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is not putting tomatoes into a fruit salad. Because it's a very different flavor, but we're going off track. Off track when we're talking about pizza. So I can understand a lot of people like pineapple. However, it seems to be a divisive thing. That you either really like it on pizza or you really hate it on pizza. And I think under most circumstances, when you're ordering a pizza, particularly from a pizza place where you're bringing it into your house, you're doing it for the purpose of social integration and not social segregation. The more people you can satisfy when you order a pizza, generally speaking, the better the social outcome will be. So if the goal is to make the most people happy and content with the choice, you would want to take the things that most people are okay with. That's most commonly cheese, which is usually for the people that have very picky flavor palettes, followed by pepperoni, usually behind that bacon, because most people like bacon, unless there are religious considerations, if you're Jewish or Muslim, and sausage, similar thing, because that also has pork in it. But those are the very common topics. Sometimes you'll get vegetables in terms of peppers.
Yeah, you can tailor it to your audience a little bit.
Right, you can. So there are lots of options in that, and then just pineapple is thrown in. And of the things that are contentious, I feel like pineapple is the one that is most likely to be contentious and probably should be removed from the list of standard pizza toppings.
I can definitely see that, because typically when you're putting pineapple on pizza, you're pretty much only putting it on there with ham. You're not putting a whole lot of other
Hawaiian
things.
pizza?
Yep.
Yep.
That's pretty much the only time I've ever seen pineapple on a pizza.
Which means you're automatically excluding the Jews and Muslims.
That is a good point.
I believe that Hawaiian pizza is racist. So, okay. If we eliminate pineapple because it's the most divisive, that sets a dangerous precedent. Because if we always eliminate the most divisive, then we're left with no toppings.
Yes, that is very true.
Because you can just keep reapplying that elimination process, and then we're left with no toppings on pizza, which I think not everyone, most people would agree, pizza with no toppings is just bread.
Yeah. Maybe at best you get a very basic cheese pizza, but that's not
Oh,
particularly
but
fun.
that's insensitive to the vegans.
It's when you get vegan cheese.
You mean sadness?
Yeah.
Wakey, wakey, eggs and bakey. No, I'm vegan. Wakey, wakey, vegetables and sadness. So no, that's an interesting question. With vegan pizza, pineapple probably makes more sense.
Yes.
Because it does have an interesting flavor palette. It's actually significantly more interesting than something like broccoli.
Yes, broccoli on pizza just does not work.
I completely disagree. Of the vegetables that I think you can put on pizza, I actually really like broccoli on pizza.
It's one of the few that I do not love on pizza by any means.
So what tastes good to you?
I am definitely one of those people that really likes lots of peppers and onions on my pizzas.
I'm with you so far.
Definitely lots of pepperoni.
Yep.
Some bacon.
Absolutely.
If we're going to be a little exotic, a barbecue chicken pizza is pretty good.
Sure. The barbecue sauce can be a little sweet for me, but again, that's mixing with the savory, and I guess that's a personal preference, but sure.
Yeah.
Usually if the barbecue sauce maybe replaces the tomato sauce.
Yes, that's typically what you'd see.
Sure. Onions?
Oh, yes. You gotta have onions.
Mushrooms.
I like them. I do know that they do tend to be pretty divisive around other people, though.
So that's another good example. Mushrooms do actually have a similar flavor palette to, or flavor profile to, not cheese, but they mesh better, I think, than pineapple. Most people would say that mushrooms work better than pineapple. So should mushroom be included?
I think, in general, that might not be a bad idea. Although I could definitely see the picky people not liking all the mushrooms.
And I would contend that most people are probably not allergic to mushrooms. At least it's not something that I've usually heard.
Yeah, I haven't run into that one.
However, pineapple, I know a couple of people that have pineapple allergy where their mouth will get itchy. So should allergies be a consideration on what should be a standard set of pizza toppings?
Well, if we go that route, then you're probably not going to have cheese very often because dairy is a pretty common thing.
Right. It's something like 80% of humans will develop some degree of lactose intolerance throughout their life.
Right.
But you're eating pizza. Is cheese standard? Is cheese required as part of what makes pizza pizza?
I think for most American pizzas, that is definitely the case. Most people, when they think of a pizza, they think of a very bready crust with some tomato sauce, cheese, and then whatever toppings they want.
Yeah, we didn't even cover that. The fact that pizza means different things for different people. In Italy, where pizzas, I believe, first came from, I've been to Italy, and the pizza that they served there, the authentic pizza, was the worst pizza I've ever had in my life. They take very, very, very thinly pressed dough and burn it to basically a crisp, intentionally. That's just how it is. It's supposed to be crispy. The thinnest possible tomato sauce that you can get, and a couple of pieces of cheese. Like, it's a grating of cheese, a light grating of cheese. And there's very little substance to it at all. And we're used to, as Americans, we're used to that sort of...
Used to more.
Yes, exactly. It's more substantial. So what makes a pizza a pizza?
I think definitely the crust is a big deal with a pizza. It doesn't necessarily have to be made of bread. I know cauliflower crust is starting to become a bigger thing nowadays.
I've had that. That's pretty good.
Yeah, so we can't exclude that.
Is the form important? For instance, if you take a flour-based kind of crust or dough, cook it with tomato sauce and cheese and various other pieces of meat inside of it, but you roll it up. If you roll it up, it's more of a burrito.
Yes.
Like a burrito with salsa as opposed to tomato sauce.
Yeah.
So I've heard of a kind of a cube analogy of various food forms if you have the same ingredients. A pizza, for instance, if you expanded out a pizza into more of a cube shape, 5 of the sides would be covered in dough. The bottom, all of the outside edges, but not the top. Whereas a burrito, if it's completely wrapped, all 6 sides would be covered. And a taco, 3 sides, the bottom, left, and right.
Okay.
So I think a pizza is something where the dough covers the bottom and all horizontal sides, but not the top. And you can have deep dish or thin crust, but even on thin crust,
that's gonna play around with those ratios a little bit, probably.
Even on thin crust, there's usually some sort of edge, because if the cheese and sauce goes all the way out to the edge, it's going to be overflowing and you can't easily eat it.
Yes.
So I think there usually should be at least some sort of rim around the outside edge and toppings in the middle or on the top. So deep dish, for instance, Chicago-style pizza, you have very, very deep. And it doesn't really matter the order, because Chicago is a good example where they put the tomato sauce on top and then all the toppings under.
Yep, that definitely confused me the first time I had one of those.
Which makes it not toppings. They're bottomings? Do they still call them toppings?
I mean, the box says they were toppings when I got those.
But I mean, it's Chicago. They do a lot of things backwards.
Yeah.
We can get into those in other videos or podcasts. Anyway, so I think open top, or the main ingredients besides the dough, should be on the top. And
it's important that the top be open.
Yes. Now, you can, for instance, New York style are large slices, and generally speaking, you fold them, and then they're kind of closed.
Then it's kind of taco-like.
So is New York pizza a taco? Because you have to fold it like a taco. And then outsides are bread or dough, and
all the good stuff's inside
it. All the good stuff's inside. So is New York pizza actually a taco?
It kind of depends on your definition of taco, but I think with what we've described here, it is.
You can have a soft shell taco, so it doesn't have to be crispy.
Yeah.
I think that New York slices are tacos.
I think they'd be very confused if we ordered them like tacos, though.
But you can take any pizza slice and turn it into a taco.
It'd probably be hard with some of the more thick crust pizzas.
Here's a good question for you. Is it okay to put pineapples on tacos?
I mean, I could definitely see it working better on a taco than a pizza.
Have you known anyone to ever even think about putting pineapple on a taco?
One person.
Name them. I must find... No. That's very unique. And again, it just... Pineapple I see much more as a dessert food, or like a fruit side. Yeah. Included in a fruit salad, that's all fine. But it
doesn't necessarily fit what you think of as a main type dish.
Right. Okay, so to kind of bring it back to what we were talking about earlier, what should the primary list of ingredients be? There are also specialty shops where you can select from a wider than normal range of pizza toppings. There are places that put macaroni and cheese on pizza, which is very good, by the way. Spaghetti on pizza, also really, really good.
I've definitely had that one.
What are some other strange things that you can think of?
Yeah, the barbecue chicken is a pretty common one that I like. I've seen dessert pizzas.
Sure. And that's kind of a different form factor than what I think we're primarily discussing. And dessert pizzas, I think there's no problem in separating those out. It's just the form factor that they're presented in, with the 5 of the 6 sides. Again, to bring back that cube example, 5 of the 6 sides are dough, or some sort of maybe dessert dough, whatever you would use in a pie, for instance. And the top would be some sort of sugary topping, usually frosting.
Yeah, Nutella is a pretty common one.
Nutella pizza. I'm glad I ate before making this recording. So, yeah, I think we agree. Dessert toppings are a separate discussion. We can come back to that, of what is it okay to include on a dessert pizza. But for a primary pizza, excluding specialty items, I think the goal of pizza places should be to present a list of toppings that most people would be okay with. You know, like 90% of people, well, not 90% of people, that...
More like 70%, maybe.
If you have a party of 10 people, you would be able to reasonably satisfy everyone to the point where they're willing to contribute to paying for the pizza with the list of toppings that you have.
I can definitely see that.
which I think most people would say pepperoni, onion, sausage, bacon, normal cheese, but that's not really a topping. That's just, I think that's a component part. I think the dough,
We can assume cheese is part of it.
cheese and tomato sauce or some sort of sauce, sometimes Alfredo or barbecue. I think that those are the primary components, not the toppings. But the toppings, pepperoni, onions, sausage, ham, arguably. It's a different form of sausage, basically. And maybe some peppers.
Yeah.
Usually green peppers.
Yeah.
Possibly jalapenos. Those are pretty standard as well.
Yes.
So that's kind of your standard list. Usually pineapple is also included in that.
I would definitely be curious to see how much pineapple pizzas people actually sell.
So here's a question for you. What are the detriments of including something in the list of stereotypical ingredients? Essentially, you need to have those resources on hand to be prepared to make that type of pizza. I think that if very few people and a negligible number of people actually order pineapple on pizza, and you have to commit the resources in terms of refrigeration and space, pineapple is probably going to be more wasteful than it is beneficial.
Yes, that is true.
Granted, having more options increases the likelihood that people will come to your pizza place over someone else. So from the capitalist perspective, you want to have lots of options, but balance that with not wasting space.
Yes. One thing, too, is you might get somebody who is a national chain and they want to keep their supply the same across the entire country, because there are definitely going to be regional differences.
Oh, that's a good question. So should pineapple be available widely in Hawaii, but not in the continental United States?
I think that is more likely. It's probably going to be eaten significantly more in Hawaii on a pizza than in the continental U.S. It's also going to be significantly fresher pineapple than you would see than if you were up in places like Alaska.
Probably. Well, I mean, anything's going to be fresher than if you're in Alaska, unless you're eating bear, which I can't say I've had.
And I also don't think many people would put that on a pizza.
A bear pizza?
Yeah.
Now, my mind is just trying to imagine what that would be, but I can't because I haven't had bear. So I don't think that bear should be included in the set of normal toppings that are offered. So I think another benefit of having a consistent set of ingredients is that people know what to expect. People can go to your pizza joint who've never been there and know what to expect. Is that beneficial?
I think so, because across the U.S., everybody has this general idea of this is what a pizza should look like. Yes, there are going to be regional differences between like New York and Chicago, but in general, people are expecting, the standard crust with tomato sauce and cheese. So having a relatively consistent list of toppings that everybody knows makes it significantly easier for them to order when they just stop by your shop. After all, people do travel a fair bit around the U.S., and they may go to places that they've never been, so it's nice to find something somewhat familiar.
Which is why you would normally go to a chain if you're looking for something familiar. But if you're traveling, a lot of times you'll look for where are the places that I haven't heard of so that I can try something new. And in that case, if you're trying something new, you would want something that isn't standard. So should the primary pizza joints, so for instance, like Papa John's or Pizza Hut, should the well-known chains have mostly stereotypical pizza toppings from a standard set of toppings, while other mom and pop shops should branch out and do more of the weird, wacky stuff, like pineapple, weird and wacky, like the people that have pineapple on pizza.
I think that could work pretty well. It would definitely bring more people in the door of those smaller shops if you are in a tourist hub.
Which is good for the small businesses.
Exactly. I would worry that they might alienate some of their customers. If I was to go in just wanting a basic pepperoni pizza, they probably wouldn't give that to me. And if you are in a small town, that mom and pop shop is going to be the only one.
Sure. So small towns, it doesn't make sense. But in large towns, the the, the normal chain restaurants are going to be there. But the mom and pop shops will also be in the large towns, and that's where you're more likely to have large numbers of people and tourists specifically to be able to support the overhead that comes along with having more options available. If you have, let's say you have 30 toppings available, you need spots for 30 toppings. You need to manage ordering those toppings and making sure that you stay stocked on them so that it's actually available when people want them, and make sure that they don't go bad. And a lot of times for really things like anchovies. Actually, I think anchovies are canned, so they probably don't go bad.
But something people don't eat a lot of.
Right. So if there is something that can go bad and people don't eat a lot of, but actually might go well on a pizza, I'm trying to think of an example of what that might be. How long do eggs usually stand for?
A fair bit.
And actually, I think I've had egg on pizza, and that's pretty good.
I could definitely see that working.
You get what I mean, though. That if there's something that most people wouldn't want, but it would set them apart from other chains, it's going to be an extra overhead, but there's a benefit to having that because it's more likely for you to choose to go there. And I think that it's probably a good idea for the main chains to stick to the main toppings, and as you go further and further away from large chains, you increase the number of toppings because it increases the likelihood of people wanting to go to your location since you're more unique.
I could definitely see that. And I would definitely expect some of those smaller, more unique shops wouldn't stray from necessarily having a basic cheese pizza available to folks, but their bread and butter, we'll say, is going to be those more specialty type things.
But bread and butter makes toast, not pizza. Oh man, bad puns. So, throw you a curveball here. Should there be legal legislation to enforce that primary chains can only have standard foods to make sure that when people go to a chain restaurant, they know approximately what to expect?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Why not? It increases that would help small businesses in the sense that if you want to start up a pizza place, you are more likely to succeed if the main chains are only allowed to sell certain things and you can sell everything else. So it would give small businesses a boost, even though it's government intervention in the private sector. It's a portion of the private sector. The fact that they're chains means that they're already fairly well off. They have a solid customer base. They have the customer recognition wherever you go. So they're going to be continuing to get a lot of money, and limiting them to here's your legal restriction on you're only allowed to offer these toppings. So that's probably what they were offering anyway. Whereas the mom and pop shops can say, hey, you want some, an actual special pizza, something that you'll remember? Here you go. Come to my place. It can benefit small business and would affect the service that you would be able to provide as a large organization, but it wouldn't significantly hurt them.
I would just be worried about how that law was placed into effect, all the semantics behind it as well. Are they going to list specific toppings or say, we're going to let this United States Pizza Association determine what the top 10 toppings are, and those are the ones that chain pizza places have to use?
Let's be honest, though. A United States Pizza Association sounds like a good idea.
It wouldn't surprise me if it
Maybe
already
not in
existed.
this context, but it does sound like something that I want to go visit. Can I take a tour of your facility? Do you include free samples? As long as they don't have pineapple.
It probably wouldn't be that fun. I have a feeling it's just a big, boring building in the middle of nowhere.
Bureaucracy.
Yep.
So, convince me that there should not be a law for large organizations to limit the pizza toppings to a specific set of lists for predictability and have little to or no restrictions on smaller businesses that are under, let's say, five restaurants.
Well, to start, you are going to be squashing some innovation because even though the smaller chains are going to be more likely to do things, those larger chains have more money that they can put behind research and development, which sounds kind of silly.
Research and development about pizza.
You wouldn't believe how much work goes into designing food nowadays. They put a lot of work into determining.
Yes, I only eat designer pizza. Yes.
They put a lot of work into making this food somewhat addicting. They make sure that they put just the right amount of sugar in the sauce, just the right amount of salt to balance it out. So they have the means to make some really interesting food. But if you are limiting them to just, say the standard like pepperoni and sausage, they really have their hands tied.
Now, you just mentioned the right amounts of things like salt and sugar and cilantro and other. You were basically listing off spices, which have nothing to do with toppings. Putting in different. So, for instance, sausage. You can have different types of sausage. Pepperoni. You can get different variations on pepperoni, but they'll be similar, but you can tweak them and make them more addictive as long as you're not doing anything illegal. It would be legally questionable to put cocaine in your pepperoni. Now, we can come back to that. Should you be permitted to put drugs in your pizza? But I think in terms of reasonable expectations, I think spices, sure. You can have your signature spice. You can copyright your sauce and have a really unique sauce and modify that in the large chains. But limiting the amount of variation can increase the expectability on larger chains, because you expect the larger chains to have some sort of continuity from one to another, whereas smaller chains you don't. And I think that still permitting them to do the research of how do we make people really, really like our sauce so that it stands out against other chains, that's where the larger organizations should be focusing, because they have the resources to be able to do that research and compete on large scales against other large organizations. For the mom and pop shops or the smaller chains, they don't have the research to say, hey, I'm going to get 300 people to start doing taste tests on my pizza, and I'm going to have it be scientifically reviewed to see how to develop my particular niche of pizza. It doesn't make sense for the small chains, but it does for the large chains. So would it be good to legally enforce that to make sure that the larger organizations are focusing on competitiveness with each other and not with the small chains?
But in the grand scheme of things, that also means that the large organizations are kind of stuck. They're going to have a set menu forever, really. If you just say you are stuck with these toppings, you couldn't really add much to your list or try to gain customers that way. You just have to work on making the best pepperoni you could. When in the grand scheme of things, they're probably not making their own pepperoni. They're ordering it from a supplier that also supplies the other large pizza chains. So in the end, you're making all these pizza chains be very similar to one another.
Sure, which means there's going to be less of a difference between the large chains, so you're kind of limiting the competition there.
Exactly. In some ways, that could drive people to the smaller shops. But at the same time, with a franchise, you might be able to open a shop in places where you may not have otherwise been able to, just for money. It takes a lot of money to open a kitchen and stay up to date on all the health codes and similar things. So even just having the ability of this franchise to come in and put up a shop is very useful. And if you allow them to continue to innovate, then they can help change the market.
I agree. Having smaller shops be more likely to come into the market would be a good idea. If you reduce the competition from large organizations against the small ones, you increase the likelihood of someone else coming into the market. Now, that doesn't include small organizations becoming large organizations. So how would the transition work?
That's the tricky part, because if you had a small organization, they're not, and you were trying to transition them to be larger, say we capped it at 5 locations and you're trying to open a 6th, are you going to make the small organization completely change their menu?
And now they're no longer allowed to have those ingredients. We make it a mathematical equation. You are allowed to have 50 ingredients, or let's make it larger, 100 ingredients minus the number of stores. 101 for the sake of ease. So you have 101 ingredients. Doesn't matter what the list is.
Okay.
That those 101 ingredients must include the top, let's say, 5 most eaten things, which, again, I'm guessing would be pepperoni, sausage, onion, bacon, and probably ham.
That sounds reasonable.
Okay, so those top 5, we have that be a standard across everyone. Wherever the pizza joint is, it should be required to have those 5 so that at least people can have some sort of expectation. You can have up to 95 others in your store if you're a one-off store. If you have 2 stores, you can have 94 additional ones, which means a total of 99. If you have 3 stores, you have a total 2 stores. I lost count. 5 stores, you can have 95. 10 stores, you can have 90. If you're one of the really monster chains where you have 90 stores or 95 stores or above, now you're down to that minimum 5.
Okay, so if you have, let's say, 120 locations, you can only serve those 5.
Correct. So, and I mean, you're not going to go from having 5 locations to 120 locations overnight.
That is true.
So, this would be an organic change from having lots and lots of decisions down to having very few decisions, which would allow newcomers to the market can say, hey, guess what? I'm a newcomer. I have all the toppings you could possibly want. And it would eliminate the competition, or at least a majority of the competition, between the large-scale chains who are now focusing on really, really refined pizza flavors and working on, hey, we're going to make a specific sauce, something that people will be able to say, oh, this is the sauce from Papa John's, something like that. As opposed to the small businesses that are trying to get into the market. Enforcing that limitation on the number of pizza toppings would make it easier for new organizations to get into the market because it automatically gives them a niche thing that they can do. They're like, I know that I can't get... Let me think of an example. I know I can't get habaneros on a pizza at Papa John's because, well, they're not allowed to carry it. Let's be honest, I don't think that they carry it now. But if I go to mom and pop shop, maybe I can get some habaneros and get a nice spicy pizza. Am I wrong?
That is definitely true. But I'm curious how we would even put this into effect in the first place. Would we have to phase out half the menu of many of those large pizza chains today? Or would we sort of grandfather them in and say, nope, you can't add anything new?
No, if you were to put this law in place, you would need to make sure that in order for it to work, the large organizations have to abide by the rules to allow new people to come into the market. And if you say, oh, you're grandfathered in, then they already have the really beneficial standing of being very well known by people and having stores all across the country, or all across the world, really. And so they already have that infrastructure there. And if they don't have to follow the rules, they're going to crush the other large organizations or other small organizations that become large. So everyone would have to abide by that. The question is, should that be enforced? Is it something that the government should enforce, or just set as a socially enforced expectation of large pizza joints? Because if I go to a large pizza joint, I expect there to be a certain number of toppings and a certain set of toppings. And if I go to one and they don't have those toppings there, I would probably go somewhere else. So should it be a market enforced or a government enforced rule?
I think if we were to do this, I think more market enforcement would go over well with people. If the government was going to tell me, oh, sorry, you can't have peppers on your pizza anymore, that would make me not very happy.
Or if you do, you will require a small business that is smaller than X size to provide it for you, or you'll have to make it yourself.
Right.
And the market would allow the people to basically be voting on what they believe should be a standard set.
Right.
Obviously, they're voting with their wallets of this should be included. Pepperoni should be included. If you go to somewhere that makes pizza and they don't have pepperoni, despite the fact that pepperoni is not a common thing anywhere else, where else have you eaten pepperoni?
I mean, I've definitely had it in salads, but that is probably a one-off compared to a lot of people.
Sure, and I've had it at some sandwich places. We'll have pepperoni. Usually it's some form of salami. Pepperoni is a little bit more unusual because it's usually on pizza. It's just synonymous with pizza at this point. So I expect there to be pepperoni. And if I go to a place and they just don't even have it as a menu option, I probably wouldn't go there again. So people really are effectively voting with their wallets.
Right.
And I think that that's kind of the circumstance that we have with pineapple, that people obviously occasionally get it and they're voting with their wallets.
Yes.
So arguably enforcing it from a governmental perspective, while it could have benefits for both large and small businesses, it could benefit everyone and give expectation of for the large chains, and you would be able to expect something unique from some of the smaller chains, and it gives that consistency wherever you go, but still variety at the same time. I think that that enforcement could be beneficial, but who chooses? Flavor preferences change.
Exactly. And if you put it into law, it's going to take a really long time for them to change any of that.
It takes a long time for flavors to change. Flavor preferences.
That is true. It definitely takes more than a generation in many cases.
Let's be honest, sometimes changing laws takes more than a generation too.
Yeah.
So would it be, is it better to let a free market decide rather than governmental enforcement of pizza laws?
I think for the specifics, it makes more sense for the market to decide. If we wanted to go the route of the government being involved here, they could put out a law saying, hey, we want to regulate how many toppings are available to large pizza chains that fit this specific description, and we're going to leave it up to the Pizza Association to figure out what these toppings are.
Interesting. What about moral responsibilities?
What do you mean by that?
But you don't understand the morals of pizza?
I mean, it mostly just brings people together.
No, that's exactly my point. Is pizza is generally a social thing. The fact that you can cut it into slices, it's easy to split up between people. It's meant to be, or it has become a very socially accepted socialization food, because everyone is eating from the same source and eating the same thing. So you want it to be mostly homogenous, or something that people can agree on. So moving away from the chains and offerings, if you want pizza to be successful from a social perspective, man, that's something I never thought I'd say. If you want pizza to be successful from a social perspective, you want it to meet the needs and desires of as many people as possible. And again, assuming that you're not trying to kill or spite the person, you want it to match their expectations. So you should only be ordering the things that most people would like. And I think if occasionally people will like pineapple, but if you have a party of 10 people, probably one person will like pineapple. 10% is a significant amount, but for a party of 10,
you're not going to order one pizza for that poor person that likes pineapple.
Right, exactly. So I feel like it shouldn't be included as a standard set or a standard expectation, and people shouldn't be having the expectation that pineapple is a normal thing on pizza, because it's not normal.
I mean, that's definitely going to depend on where in society that you ask, because there are going to be some pockets where for those people, pineapple is super common and they wouldn't expect pizza without pineapple.
And in places in the Middle East, they may put different things on pizza. Do they put camel on pizza? Do people eat camel?
I'm not sure. I wouldn't put it past some people, though.
Maybe instead of ham?
Might work.
I'm imagining a camel rolling around in the mud. Like a pig. So, yeah, other societies will have different reasons for pizza, but assuming that it is used as a social thing, I think that people should primarily order things that are more socially acceptable or acceptable to the most number of people. Basically, a democratic rule of make as many people as happy as you possibly can. Now, that means that for the person that really, really, really likes pineapple on pizza, the type of people that normal people avoid, they can still get their pineapple on pizza, but then they may be a social outcast, which makes them more unique. It may be a quirky thing that your group of friends says, oh, you're the pineapple guy. There are ways that can work into the social structure, but should the goal of toppings on pizza be the social integration of individuals?
I mean, I think it definitely helps in that case. I've always just thought of pizza more as food than anything else.
You only think of pizza as food?
Yeah.
You
It's some
small-minded
pretty good
individual.
nourishment. It's got a little bit of everything on it. It's got some meat, some dairy, some vegetables, some carbs in the crust.
Pizza is life.
Well, I see we've got some very different views on that.
I agree. Yes, pizza is primarily sustenance. And, I mean, just in terms of sustenance, as a species that, generally speaking, eats 2 to 3 times a day, it has become a social thing. And in some cultures, for instance, I believe Korean culture, videos are made of people eating because there is a social stigma around eating alone, a certain discomfort that comes with eating alone. So people will make videos of themselves eating so that you can play a video while you're eating so that it's kind of like you're eating with another person. So there is definitely a social aspect to eating. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And yes, there are people, a lot of people that will be sitting at home, order a pizza in, and will just sit there alone eating an entire pizza. I don't deny that. I've done that. But I think
The majority of the time you have a pizza, it's not just you, it's with like a family or friends.
it's for the fact that it's split into slices makes it ideal for sharing with other people. And if it's ideal for sharing with other people and it is most frequently used with multiple people, the toppings that are put on it should be as conformative as possible to facilitate the social interaction.
I can definitely see that because you want your group to all eat the same pizza for the most part. You don't want to be ordering a separate pizza for each person because that's kind of silly.
It defeats the purpose of having a pizza. Now, there are personal pizzas for that, for people that don't understand the purpose of pizza, but, you know...
It's not the same.
Right. And that's usually the type of thing that you go to, like, for instance, the Taco Bell Pizza Hut crossovers where you have things from both menus. Sure, that'll be a personal pizza. But for most pizza places, you would expect it to be for a large number of people.
That is true. Although part of the problem is you are buying it for your group. If your entire group really likes pineapple for some reason, wouldn't you want that to be available to please them?
What if they're Nazis?
I think that opens a whole nother can of worms.
So I guess the dangers of having social facilitation through food, what if you're facilitating something that most people would disagree with? For instance, what if there is a group that are cannibals and they want to have people they want to connect with people both mentally and physically and want to have people on pizza, and all of them agree that people should be on pizza?
If they are willing to provide their flesh to be on this pizza...
Okay, yeah. Let's add the qualification. They're using their own flesh.
Yeah, if they want to do that, they can be my guest. I am not going to eat that pizza, but all the more power to them.
That's okay. Do you think that people should be able to eat themselves on pizza?
Yes.
So cannibalism should be permitted, both socially and legally.
Yes.
As long as it's self-cannibalism or cannibalism between consenting parties.
Right. The consent is a very important part of that.
What if the person is, one of the people ends up saying, I am okay with dying for the sake of being able for my friends to have cannibal pizza?
You know, if they want to, I'm not going to get in their way.
Okay. Freedom of, I guess,
Free will, you know.
Self-determination. And as long as the group can agree on what goes on the pizza, that's up to you. I think we would agree that for most circumstances, putting people on pizza is something that a main chain should not do.
Absolutely. There's no way they could find enough consenting adults to have a big pizza for everybody.
In our current society.
Yeah.
Now, granted, there are other problems with eating other people in a society. particularly on something as common as pizza. If pizza remains to be something common, and let's say that human flesh, which supposedly tastes similar to pork, I've heard that when actually cooked, it's a similar consistency, smell, and taste to pork. So it'd be like sausage. And if there's some people that get a particular liking to it, and it becomes a thing where people eating other people, and like, for instance, if people are tired of living and want to commit suicide and say, sure, put me on a pizza, I don't care. If that becomes a normal thing, is there anything wrong with that?
I don't think so. As long as you're not forcing people to eat that pizza.
You would want to be careful with the financial incentive on that.
That is true.
Of like, oh, I'm poor and my kids are going to be homeless, I better just sell myself to the pizza industry, to the pizza association. Those cannibals.
Oh yeah, you gotta watch out for them. That is something you have to be careful of, and we probably do not want to get into the business of raising humans for meat either, to help facilitate these human pizzas.
But you could use their organs for other things. There could be some really good societal benefits for it.
I don't know if we want to dive into all of those benefits.
That's
right
maybe
now.
an ethical question for a different discussion. So bring it back to groups, and particularly groups with weird ideologies. So pizza can be used for social integration, social communication, and just facilitating social interaction. If the interaction is associated with negative interaction, or if the pizza is associated with negative social interaction, so for instance, gang members, does that negative connotation, assuming that you have a negative connotation for a gang member, does that negative connotation transfer to the pizza? Is there a type of food, pizza included, that can get a negative connotation because of its association with a particular social group of people?
I think it can happen in some very extreme circumstances, but something as common as pizza, it would take something really bad for it to have some negative connotations to it.
Like if we found out that the reason that pizza is so addictive is because all of the major chains have been adding cocaine into all of their pepperoni and cheese.
Exactly.
Do you like that transition back to something that we were talking about earlier?
Yep.
So should you be able to put anything... Again, this brings up the question of should you be able to put anything on a pizza? Cocaine and other drugs are edible, and you can get effects from them. It makes them more addicting. So what's the difference between adding sugar, which is a chemical that can be very addicting, and cocaine, which is also addicting? Should there be a difference between putting those on pizza?
I think we're going to have to draw the line here between if I was serving you a pizza as a friend versus a chain serving me a pizza.
Sure, if it's you and I, like, hey, let's get high together, and we want to put cocaine on a pizza, there would be maybe some... There are other ethical questions involved of what should the government's involvement be in drugs, which, again, I think is a different discussion. But in terms of assuming that drugs are acceptable, and it's okay to do the drugs, there's nothing wrong with including that in the pizza as long as all the parties involved consent.
Right, and I think the consent is a big part of it. Is many drugs do have mind-altering effects.
Sure.
If, say, I was to smoke something and I didn't realize what was in it, things probably wouldn't end very well.
Sure. So, and I think part of that is, for instance, specifically with drugs, a lot of times it's a group of people doing drugs, and there's usually peer pressure to have everyone included in taking the drugs. With pizza, it's similar. Usually, if you order a pizza, the expectation is that everyone will partake in that pizza. It's not socially frowned upon to not eat the pizza. That's fine. But if you are that one person that like, oh yeah, you guys can have pizza, I think I'm going to have a salad.
Yeah, you're definitely going to be a little bit of an outcast.
Yeah, you'll be a little ostracized. So if part of that reason is because pizza... or because of the toppings that are on it, you want to exclude yourself. Why don't we not have everything included in the pizza and have them available separately and kind of a make your own pizza?
I mean, I have been to places like that, and it works very well.
It's a little harder to do delivery, though.
Yes. Yep. That is definitely part of the problem. And I could definitely see if we were ordering a large pizza, it's going to be kind of hard to put the toppings on there for each person because you're going to want to make sure, like, oh, you want this eighth of the pizza, let's put your toppings on this little bit here.
So it's also harder to measure out, all right, here's exactly how many toppings go on this size of pizza and this size of pizza. And that also opens up to people running out of toppings, because if you're making it at home, you're not going to separate it the same way that they would on the at the main chain while they're making the pizza as a whole instead of separately. So you would have a higher likelihood of abuse by the people involved to say, I have a slice of pizza and I'm going to fill it with pepperoni, and you don't have enough pepperoni to fill up the entire pizza, so other people would run out of the toppings. So separating them, while it gives the benefit of more people would have more control over the pepperoni, it takes away from the practicality of it.
Exactly.
And I think part of having pizza that people are mostly okay with sets a social expectation that, hey, this is what we're eating. Are you interested in partaking? And there's a social pressure there of, yes, I will partake at least somewhat. And, oh, well, I'm not a huge fan of pepperoni, but some people want a supreme pizza with a bunch of vegetables and various types of meat, and the other half of the pizza is just going to be pepperoni. You know what? I'll partake in the pizza. Pepperoni isn't my favorite, but sure, I'll have the pepperoni. So I think that sets an expectation, the fact that you have a uniform pizza and people partake in that and are socially expected to partake in that. It sets the precedent that I am foregoing some of my own social discomfort for the sake of the group. And it shows that you're willing to partake in group activities. And I think that actually is a benefit to having set toppings included in the pizza and integrated into the pizza, because it shows a willingness to integrate socially.
But you could still do that if you just had a menu from wherever you're ordering the pizza.
Sure, and that will be taken into account. If we want to still satisfy as many people as possible. But the fact that you have that discussion, the fact that you talk about, here's what I would be okay with on the pizza, and here's what I wouldn't be okay with, and just coming to that agreement, that facilitates social discussion. And you have to capitulate to other people, and other people have to capitulate to you to come to an agreement. And just getting to the agreement on what kind of pizza to order makes you interact with each other socially, which again is frequently the point of pizza, is to facilitate, besides sustenance, it's to facilitate social interaction. And I think that not having the toppings on the side forces you to work together to choose toppings that fit the desires of the most people.
I can definitely agree with that. But today, already most pizza chains do have very similar toppings.
Which is, again, comes back to the expectation of, I can expect to have certain toppings available at a big name chain, and that makes the conversation easier. So having a limited number of options makes the conversation easier, as opposed to going to a specialty shop where you have 50 topping choices, that you're more expected to kind of get your own pizza or get a slice of a pizza.
Right, but today, because of market forces, that list tends to be about the same for all the big chains anyway. So it's not going to be too bad to sit down with a group of friends and figure out what belongs on a pizza, even if you don't look at a menu.
And there's actually benefit to that. The fact that you guys are having a discussion, learning about each other, learning what you're okay with, what you're not okay with. Like, no, I literally can't have sausage because I'm Jewish. Maybe you didn't know that the person was Jewish. Hey, cool, you're learning about your friends.
It's true. Usually that stuff does tend to come out when you're ordering food together.
Right. So it comes back to the idea that eating is a social experience, and you can learn from each other while setting up for that, deciding what food to have, as well as participating in eating it. And I think pizza is a very good representation of that, which again brings me back to pineapple. Pineapple is divisive. I think that the fact that, I'm bringing it up a lot in this conversation. It's not because I actually hate pineapple. I really like pineapple, just not on pizza. And there are, I would argue, very few people, a substantial number, but compared to the people that like pizza, pineapple on pizza, I think that those numbers are fairly small, which diminishes the social practicality of pizza.
But there aren't going to be, because there aren't that many people ordering pineapple, does it really hurt anyone for it to be on the menus? Because if I liked pineapple, but I already know most of my friends do not, am I really going to say, oh, hey guys, when we order pizza, we should put pineapple on it, when I know I'm the only one who's going to eat it?
I don't know. Would you?
No, that would just be mean.
Because of social pressure.
Right.
So then why have it as an option?
Well,
If that's going to be the majority stance, why have it as an option?
well, but you're not necessarily ordering pizza for a group of friends all the time. You know, families tend to have very similar tastes. So if I had a significant other, we had kids, chances are we'd all like the same kind of pizza. And if I liked pineapple, that would go over really well.
Okay, so family bonding over something that is socially repulsive. Oh God, my bias is showing. No, I can understand that there are groups of people that as they grow up together, they will have probably similar tastes and may actually grow to like pineapple with each other. Which, granted, you could put anything on a pizza that you want. It's just that pineapple happens to be that one thing that is a little odd, but kind of odd to the point where people kind of like it, and it's just become a thing. And the fact that it became a thing is probably evidence enough that it's reasonable.
I'd say so. I mean, you wouldn't have every pizza shop having it available if it wasn't reasonable.
That's probably fair. And again, it comes back to the idea that the markets are what decide this, which is people voting with their wallets and with their tongues. And not in the speaking about it way, but in the taste way. Which is why it wouldn't make sense to legislate it through the government of here's what you are allowed to serve, because people's tastes change. Like you said, with as you grow as a family, you will have more similar tastes than people from the other side of the world. And especially from a worldwide perspective, you should be able to put whatever that particular group of people deems to best fit on a pizza.
Exactly.
If you're in the middle of China, I guess I am assuming that pineapples are not. Do pineapples grow in China?
I don't
think it's tropical, so it would have to be imported, like probably a lot of countries throughout the world. But yeah, let's say for the Middle East, where pineapple is probably more of a luxury item, they probably don't have it as frequently there. And there are probably also going to be a lot more religious considerations if you're in the Middle East than in the West.
Yes. They're definitely going to have very different toppings available. Some of them might be the same as we see here.
You're not going to have pork and of any kind.
Right.
So no bacon, probably no pepperoni, because I think pepperoni might have pork in it.
Probably. All the good stuff
I think it's
does.
mostly beef. It does. Sausage definitely has it. So religion is, I guess, kind of takes the form of government here, where no, we are deeming that you can't have this, regardless of whether or not people want it. And I think that it's actually probably a good example of religion saying you can't have this, even if people do actually want it. And has it resulted negatively? I'm betting that pizza is not as much of a staple in the Middle East as it is in the West.
That's probably true.
Like in the West, it's the point where I can say, hey, let's have a pizza party. And you know exactly what I mean. We're going to order a bunch of pizza, and a lot of people probably get drunk and have fun. And that's something that you wouldn't have in the Middle East. So it's culturally affected. And the question is that determined by people deciding on the culture, or the culture deciding on the people? And I think from the religious perspective, the religion holds the keys, which means that the religion is imbuing it into the culture and imbuing it onto the people, as opposed to people imbuing culture.
I think that is definitely true. I think in the U.S. there is more people imbuing culture because we don't have as many religious ideas about food for the majority of the religions that you see in America.
And there are people who are religiously affected in the West, but I think that the majority of people are not religiously bound to not eat certain types of food.
Yes.
So let's bring it back to the original question of what should be allowed on pizza, and what should the things that should be taken into account when you're looking at what should be put on pizza. One point that we covered was social interaction. Is the stuff that you want to put on the pizza socially acceptable? Are you putting pepperoni on there, or are you putting people on there? That we should probably take into account.
For sure.
What can we expect when we go to various pizza places and large chains versus small chains or mom and pop shops? What is the predictability as you go from place to place with pizza? And that's probably more determined by the market of what is acceptable and what's a reasonable expectation that I walk into a pizza place, I expect to have this available.
Yeah, it's definitely market driven today. And I don't expect it to change anytime soon.
Because if it is attempted to be enforced, you stagnate the market, you reduce on the innovation of, hey, I want to try this, and you reduce the adaptability to new flavor palettes and preferences by the people that are involved. It would also enforce a universal flavor palette. For instance, if Hawaii is part of the United States and they want to have pineapple on pizza, and a lot of people over there want to have pineapple on pizza, but it's not one of the staple ingredients that is governmentally enforced, you would need to either have a different law, or you are trying to enforce uniformity in food preference, which is what's going on probably more in the religious community of you are not allowed to like pork or crab or anything like that. It's enforced not necessarily for a practical reason, just like, no, this is the reason. So yeah, I think that it's probably best to just be hands off on what you put on pizza, or at least let the people involved decide. And the fact that different organizations, particularly large chains, have already determined what the popular toppings are, which is why that's what we consider a staple set of toppings, and that's what's popular. And if people liked sausage more, they would order sausage more on pizza. If people liked ham more, they would order ham more on pizza. And that is kind of dynamically determined by the market and by the joints responding to the market. And you can send different amounts of each food to different portions or different areas if you have 100 locations across the world. So it's kind of already self-determined.
Yeah, I don't think we need to worry about it too much.
And then the question is, to what extent should we take into account social interaction? That, like you said, if you really like pineapple on pizza, to what degree are you obligated to not order something that is unique to you and to capitulate to the group?
I definitely think it is more group-based in this case, because you're going to be sharing that pizza.
Unless you weigh 300 pounds and you just feel like ordering a large pizza with every topping on it.
I think that's an outlier there.
Yeah, I think it's an outlier too. It's usually a social food, which means that for the most part, you should be expected to order normal things, or what is stereotypically normal, with the idea that, hey, maybe you can bring up, I like pineapple. Do you guys like pineapple? And see if others like it. And you know what? You will learn about each other as you go through the experience of ordering and then consuming the pizza, which I would argue is a good thing. Learning about each other and having that interaction, even if it's an argument of, oh my gosh, you actually like pineapple on pizza? It's still a discussion, and it facilitates social interaction, which I would argue is a good thing. So
I would too.
Even if I don't think that pineapple is a good thing on pizza, the fact that it may spark a discussion is arguably good.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And as long as all parties involved are okay with it, for instance, with our cannibalism example, it's okay to put people on pizza as long as all parties involved are accepting of it, and that actually will facilitate the social integration of those individuals, physical and social integration in that case.
Yeah.
I can't say, actually, would you try pizza with people on it?
I think it'd be one of those things I'd try once. and that'd be the end of it.
I think I'm probably in the same boat. Now, what if it was you had a group of, let's say, 10 people, and part of what you did was you took a sample of everyone's flesh in the group, and like you can do that. You can take small samples of, for instance, muscle flesh out of thigh for doing various tests, and did that for each person in the group, mixed it together in kind of a chili or ground beef type thing, or ground human, and spread that throughout the pizza as some sort of social experiment or integration of like, hey, you guys are going to be closer. Is that something that you could see yourself reasonably doing?
I would probably be too grossed out.
The fact that there are a lot of people that you are looking in the eye as you're eating a piece of them?
Right. And just mentally getting over that hurdle of, hey, you are eating, your friend over there.
Isn't that the purpose of some social traditions, though, is to get over a certain discomfort to be able to become more comfortable with the people around you?
I think that definitely plays into it. But you don't necessarily want to be going over a huge hurdle initially.
It's a team building exercise.
But you might just scare me off of your team.
Do I taste that bad?
I mean, I don't know. I haven't tasted you yet.
Hey, chicka bump bump. So it's something that we would deem not socially acceptable now. But could you see it as reasonably socially acceptable in the future, where it's like, yeah, this is something expected, where we'll take a little nip of skin. So, for instance, like a family integration thing. I could imagine that there is some sort of religion or belief system where part of the integration process or part of the tradition is to nip off a small piece of skin or something, mix it in with others so that you literally have skin in the game, and that be an integration into the family. And I think that pizza is a good facilitator of that.
I could definitely see that.
Do you see that there could actually be value? I like the phrase, having skin in the game, that actually could be utilized as a social integration mechanism.
Yes. I think it'll be a long time before anybody does it.
And I think it would be a very long time before it's a normal menu option.
If ever.
I think it would be more likely to say, hey, we would like to execute, not this person. we would like to execute this tradition. This person is a new member of the family. We want to integrate them into the family. We would like you to help facilitate our partial cannibalism. And I'm talking a very small piece of flesh.
Yeah, so like the pizza place has the tools to do it right.
Right, exactly. It's a symbolic piece of flesh. That to me is like one of the more, if you're looking at pizza as a way of socially integrating others into your clique, your friend group, your family, that would be a very ideal choice to use to facilitate becoming one with each other. I mean, you could also just do it with blood. Make a blood pudding and mix that in with the pizza. That would honestly have probably a better flavor mix than pineapple would, because it's a similar flavor. It's a type of meat. So I would argue that human on pizza will probably taste better than pineapple on pizza. And there would also be a potentially beneficial social aspect to that and an integration aspect into the family.
I can definitely see that happening. The big thing is just going to be getting people to start doing it and it becoming socially acceptable.
So do we need to start doing this? Should we start protesting for people on pizza?
I'd rather not. I don't want to get in your way of protesting for people on pizza if that's what you really want.
Well, I'm not saying other people. I'm saying me and you.
I don't particularly want a pizza with people on it.
You could also, just spit on the pizza, but it's not the same. There's a negative connotation to that.
Right, it's not the same level. And I think if it was a ritual where y'all stood in a circle, you had special tools for it and everything, that's a very different type of thing and more people would be open to it.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those cultish things that you would expect to hear of that cannibal cult that incorporated pizza. But a cult is just a social group that doesn't conform to what the majority of social groups conform to. It's just a different type of social conformity that is strange enough to the norm that we view it as negative. But I would argue that it's just a perspective point, that I think it would be sustainable.
I could definitely see it being sustainable.
If you literally chop up an entire person and have them for, you are the meal of the day, that's not sustainable, because you'll eventually start, if more people like it, it'll start pulling down on the population. And that's not
That's
sustainable.
when you just don't tell them it's people.
Soylent Green is people. Right.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. Soylent Pizza is people. Right. But as a social integration, I could see it being reasonable, where you just nip off a little piece of skin or prick your finger, mix in a little bit of blood, and not even a substantial amount where you can taste it, but mix in a pinprick of blood as some sort of social integration aspect to increase the effectiveness of pizza.
I could see it working.
Do you think that it is something that is more socially acceptable, or could become more socially acceptable, than pineapple?
Weirdly, yes.
So do we agree that we would rather, as a group, have everyone put a little bit of blood, their own blood, onto a pizza, make sure it's cooked, so that if there's any disease, we don't want to transfer
that'd be
disease.
an important thing.
Make sure that it's cooked. I mean, fry the blood. And then kind of fry it, turn it into a powder, spread it on the pizza. That would be a better and more socially acceptable, or could become a more socially acceptable thing than pineapple.
I mean, if it really is only a drop, you're not going to taste it anyway.
And if you're doing it for social interactions, and if you're already drinking anyway, it's probably reasonable that you could be convinced of doing that. Granted, again, you would want to really make sure that you're not spreading diseases in that way. But diseases that can be spread through the blood can also usually be spread through sex. And if you are getting drunk, there's a likelihood that there's going to be some sort of sexual component to that, meaning that you're probably not at much more of a risk of doing our blood ritual than you are of getting a disease from having sex.
Yeah. So it sounds like this blood pizza is pretty safe.
Interesting. Just to for the purposes of increasing the social bonding effectiveness of pizza. Now, granted, then you know that, oh, we're having pizza, I have to prick my finger again, and that would be unfortunate. But if it's limited to a, like, hey, this is a special pizza.
Yeah, I definitely see it as being limited to a special pizza.
It's more special than a pineapple pizza, and it's more meaningful than a pineapple pizza.
And it would probably taste better than a pineapple pizza.
I mean, most things taste better than a pineapple pizza. Well, I wasn't expecting to reach that conclusion, but I think that's a reasonable thing to wrap up on. Any other thoughts?
No, I agree with you.
Cool. You want some pizza?
Hi everyone, thanks so much for listening to this discussion. Your interest really means a lot to us. If you want to help support this podcast and our goal of sparking discussions and bringing people together, check out how to contribute in the description. Happy deeping!
The content of this podcast does not reflect the views and opinions held by anyone involved. We will frequently be playing the devil's advocate strictly for the purpose of exploration of ideas and not as an endorsement of any subsequent action. We condemn all acts of violence other than those of self-defense against physical harm.